on a lot of sunny and cool days, from say 10-ish to 3 or 4 o'clock, we'll be pushing power back to the grid, which when you consider the size of the zoo and 73 buildings and all this stuff, that's pretty beefy. So some fun stats. This will be the largest urban accessible array in the United States. So what's that mean? Well, obviously the urban's kind of self-explanatory. We're in an ultra-urban environment, and it's accessible. So it's not in some cornfield or in some desert in Arizona, or even in a brownfield site. There's a couple of those where you see some large installations in a brownfield site. Of course, it's got like barbed wire and hot fence and bulldogs, pit bulls. So what's the educational outreach to that? Well, none. So the combination of size, locality, and accessibility is why I think, as far as the impact this could have, there's nothing else like this in the United States. So that's something, that's pretty beefy. I mean, it's not just like, hey, yay, zoo, that's big for the city. To think, when people think of Cincinnati, progressive is not the first word that comes to their mind. But this project is all about that. I mean, there's nothing else like this in the United States to this scale. So something we should all be tooting our horn about.
200 homes? It is
200 homes. And another kind of, just to put things into perspective for us, when we turn this on in about 3 weeks, we'll have more advanced energy capacity than every other zoo and aquarium in the United States combined. By a lot. Like by 3 times. So that's a little bit of like, yay, the zoo, we're awesome, but it's also about like, so what's up with the rest of the industry? What's the problem? Well, the problem is these are a pain in the butt. These are hard. I mean, the amount of effort we put into this to make this happen was incredible. So, but now we've done it. So now we're like, okay, we did it. Here's how we did it. So let's take the show on the road and let's show these other zoos like, hey, this is how we did it. That statement about having more than anybody else, if we're still saying that 3 or 4 years from now, in a way, this project kind of didn't deliver on one of the things we wanted it to. And part of that was to push the issue in the industry, not just in zoos, but just in general. I mean, if we have this, why doesn't Kings Island have it? Or Columbus Zoo, or Cleveland Zoo, or UC, or whoever? Well, the reason why is because, again, the amount of political capital and internal capital, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the human capital it takes to pull one of these off is incredible. But, for example, we had new market tax credits involved with this project, which has never been done before in Ohio, which is one of the reasons it was so complex. Well, now we've done it. So now all the lawyers and all those PNC banks and all, they've done it now. So there's a model. So if it took us 15 months, maybe the next guy, it'll be 7 or 6 or whatever.
And what was the cost of the system?
So this is an $11 million project. The zoo has no money in this, no upfront capital. So Malink Corporation, they're out of Milford. So they design it, engineer it, install it, everything. They are going to own it, operate it, maintain it, insure it. I mean, literally the zoo is a host. So what our involvement is we buy the power that comes off this array for at least the first 7 years. So for 7 years, we're going to buy this power at basically market rate from last year when we kind of signed the deal. So a nice low rate, because we paid almost nothing in Ohio, right, for electricity compared to the rest of the country. So a nice low rate, and it's locked in at a nice low inflation rate. So in 2 or 3 years, when electricity gets out of control again, like it did 2 or 3 years ago, this 20% of our load is locked in. And for a nonprofit, price certainty is huge. So be able to basically kind of, that 20% done, locked in, that is huge for us.
20% of your energy
Yep.
cost was
20%.
provided by this?
Significant load. And then in year 8, we have the option to buy it. So if it was $11 million now, of course, through depreciation, all these other, it'll be down. I mean, it's all accountants at that point, but let's say it's a couple $1 million in 8 years to buy it. So there's a risk there, but now we get the free energy for the next 17 years, because 25 years kind of gets you the typical end of a life cycle for solar. But the conservative value of that energy over the next 17 years, conservative, it's like $5 million. So the nice thing for the zoo, or we just continue to buy power. So the nice thing for the zoo is it's a win-win for us. We either just buy the power at a nice rate, or we take a little bit of risk and we buy it, and then of course we then have to insure it, we got to operate and maintain it, but then we have a potential for millions of dollars in savings. So trust me, our accountants have done all that math to figure out. You can say, well, $2 million, if it saves you 5 or 6, it still might not be a good deal. 17 years is a long time. Put that in the stock market or not, put it wherever. But our accountants have done the net present value and all that jazz and stuff over my head. And they're like, yeah, that's a good deal.
And the panel technology, I mean, they're warranted for 25 years, but they don't know how long. They might last for 60 years, these panels.
The reason we say 25, you're right. I mean, there's panels out there that have been out for 35, 40, 45 years, no issues. They do, their efficiency goes down, and basically, with the banks and everybody else, all their models are based on 80% capacity at 25 years. So all the financial modelers assume that. So if the banks are assuming that, you know that's a pretty conservative number. So they're like actuaries, basically, is what they are. No different than figuring out life insurance tables. It's the same thing for the banks. So again, when you think about the fact that Malink's making their money, PNC Bank's making money, otherwise they wouldn't be messing with this, right? The zoo financially, this is a win-win for us. So of course all that happens, you know, obviously this project is subsidized heavily, obviously. All solar projects are. You know, there's 30% tax credit. There's new market tax credits, which couldn't have done it couldn't have done this job without it, but man, it really threw some wrenches and things, so, but we had to do it. And that was through Uptown Consortium. So again, without Uptown, we could not have pulled this job off. There are solar renewable energy credits, the SRECs, that Ohio has a beefy market for that because our utilities are mandated to have a certain amount of portfolio from alternative energies, anywhere from nuclear to coal or to clean coal to solar or whatever. So the utilities have two options, well, three options. One, they can pay a fine. Two, they can build their own solar panels all over the place. Or three, they can buy the credits for this. So that was a huge component for this job financially. So again, First Energy bought our credits. Without that, we couldn't have done this job.
And they're not really buying the power. They're only buying the power producing capability.
That's because of that Ohio mandate. We have that. So we're one of the only handful of states that have an aggressive mandate. So.
And every little homeowner that has a few solar panels, they're making $1,000 or $2,000 a year by selling those RECs
on those two projects up there. So if you look at the financial model, I mean, it was like 68 pages. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, we had dozens and dozens of lawyers and accountants involved with this job. It was crazy. The reason I say that is because I got to give a lot of credit to my director, Thane. Because most directors, not just of zoos, any organization, would have got into this and about halfway through would have said, you know what, this is not worth it. I mean, again, the political capital we were expending with our board, with the city, with the county. Oh, it was
well, that's where Mark steps in. Tell them about your 80-20 rule.
Well,
you got 80% done. Let's do the other 20.
I mean, it was. I mean, there was even a time when Thane even said to me, we were in the middle of one of these ridiculous conference calls, and Thane was even like, you know, is this worth it? I mean, should we just pull out? And I said, you know, man, we're this close. You know, think how amazing this will be. Yada yada yada.
Look at it.
And to his credit, he said, okay, let's keep going.
Phenomenal.
Most institutional directors would have said no.
Almost made a parking lot look beautiful, doesn't it?
So you can tell you another reason this job was challenging financially is there's two big things about this that you normally don't have, again, if you're in the middle of a cornfield. One, we have the structure. $2 million of that 11 is just getting it off the ground. Yeah. So all that steel you see, $2 million, almost 20% of the job, you don't normally see that if it's on a rooftop or if it's like, again, whether it be a flat roof or like you saw at the education center. The other thing is the transmission. You can't just take the 1.6 megawatts and run it up the local utility pole. It don't work like that. You got to use it the way we're set up in Ohio right now. So we had to get this power up through this building, up under the bridge, all the way back into the middle of the zoo through existing electrical infrastructure. So of course, 1.6 megawatts, all our transformers were too small. So we upgraded all our everything had to be redone. It was $500,000 just for wire and transformers. So again, something you normally wouldn't have. So $2.5 million right off the top. So this job is about 7 cents a a watt. You know, you can do a rooftop mount for like 4, maybe 4.5. Well, you can see why. I mean, we had issues in court logistics were a mess.
Definitely.
So the point is, if we were able to do a project like this that had all those extra costs, we were able to patch it together. Market tax credits, SRECs, federal tax credits, all this other, and we pulled it off. And all the steel is up. There's 2 more bays of panels on the very far end, and we'll be done. Now, I should say, we'll be done putting the panels in. There's lots of other stuff going on.